Hi everyone, I'm Juan Pablo from Español and English Private Tutoring. Today we are going to learn about indirect objects and indirect object pronouns. We are also going to learn about something we call in this class as VCC verbs. VCC stands for, and I'm going to put it here, VCC stands for verbos de construcción contraria. Bien, verbos de construcción contraria. Yep. This is how we are going to call them in this video, VCC verbs. Okay. So I'm going to explain things that books do not explain about this. And I'm going to refer to specifically to this book, things that are not mentioned in this book, things that are missing, and mistakes. I've been teaching for more than 16 years, and I haven't found a book that doesn't have mistakes. So that's what we are going to cover here. I'm not going to go too much into detail here or give you exercises. This is just an explanation. If you are a student, you should follow along with the book. I'm going to tell you a certain page and you should take notes there. Remember that it's very important to take notes. If you are new and you want to learn Spanish, you can visit our website at espeng.net to register for classes. This video will help you understand better what is an indirect object, what is an indirect object pronoun, and what is a VCC verb. Entonces, okay, so let's start. If you're a student, please go to page 158. Sorry, not 158, page 154. So in this page, you will find a subtitle called Verb as a Subject. Now, I'm going to explain what a VCC verb is. So I'm going to give you an example. Ella, I'm going to give you two examples. First one is, ella come bien. Ella come vegetales todos los días. Change this to Spanish. Bien. Ella come vegetales todos los días. And the second sentence is, a ella le gustan los vegetales. A ella le gustan los vegetales. So here I'm going to explain shortly what is a clause. Okay? Basically, a clause is a complete idea. Normally, clauses are composed of a subject and a predicate. A subject is the part of the sentence that performs the action of the verb or what we are saying about a person, animal, or thing, or it could be also plural. Okay. So according to this information, the first sentence has a subject and also has a predicate. No? So for the first sentence, the subject, sujeto, that's how it's called in Spanish, is ella. And what is the predicate? Predicado in Spanish. Predicado is come vegetales todos los días. Okay. So why is ella the subject? Who is eating? She. So she is the one performing the action to eat. Okay. And why the predicate is comen vegetales todos los días, because the predicate includes the verb or any other verbs and anything that explain the action of the verb. Now, be careful with confusing subject with noun. A noun is an animal, place, or thing, or a person. So it's just one word. A subject is much more complex than that. A subject can be composed of many nouns and many determinants. And I'm going to go into that now. I'm going to keep it simple as it is, because that's not the purpose of this video. Now, that's our first sentence. You notice the order. The order is subject, then predicate. Right? But look what is happening with the second sentence. Try to understand why we are saying gustan and not gusta. So gustan is third person plural. It's a verb conjugated in third person plural. Why is not conjugated in third person singular? Because we are saying she. Okay. The reason why is because the subject of this sentence is not she. The subject of this sentence is los vegetales. I'm going to put it here. Los vegetales. And the predicate of this sentence is I guess you guessed it correctly, a ella le gustan. Okay. So the subject here is third person plural. That's why we are conjugating the verb in third person plural, and we are just learning present tense for now. In other words, the subject and the verb, the first verb that is conjugated, are always related in grammatical person. So, as you can see, the verb gustar is a VCC verb. And why is a VCC verb? Because it's flipping the clause. A normal clause will have the subject first and then the predicate. But the verb gustar is flipping the sentence. You have the predicate first and then the subject. That's why it's called a VCC verb, or that's why we are going to call it in this video a VCC verb. Okay. Now, knowing this, we are going to continue to page 154 with the subtitle that says verb as a subject, as the subject. What this means. And I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say a ella le gusta cantar. Now, according to what I told you, try to figure out what is the subject here. To continue with the video, you want to pause it, you can pause it and try to figure it out. I'm going to give you the answer now. In this sentence, the subject is cantar, and the predicate is a ella le gusta. Now, but you've noticed here, cantar is a verb, is not a noun. How can a verb be a part of the subject? Okay. Now, to better understand this, if I translate this directly into English, is like saying, not directly, but the way you say it in English is, she likes to sing. She likes to sing, a normal clause. But that's not what we are saying in Spanish. What we are saying in Spanish is this: singing is pleasing to her. You want to understand the structure of this sentence, you have to translate it in this way so you can understand better the meaning. Singing is pleasing to her. So in this case, singing in English is the subject. And that's a subject that is in the third person singular. So that's why we are saying is, we are not saying are. Okay. So in English, you can transform a verb into a noun. To do that, you use the gerund form, ing. Okay. So singing is not acting as a verb in the sentence, it's acting as a noun. This is what is called a nominal verb. So a nominal verb is a verb that acts as a noun, not as a verb. So this verb is acting as a noun, then we can conjugate the verb according to this noun. Nominal verbs are always considered singular and third person. They are always considered third person singular. So we had to conjugate the verb in third person singular. It's exactly the same in Spanish. Okay. And the difference here is that in Spanish, we don't use the gerund form to make a verb into a nominal verb. We use the infinitive form. For those that don't know what an infinitive verb is, in Spanish, an infinitive verb is any verb that ends on AR, ER, or IR. In other words, are verbs that are not conjugated. In English, it's like saying to sing, to eat, to dance. Those are verbs that are not conjugated. So we can use the infinitive to make a verb, to transform a verb into a noun. So in this case, cantar doesn't translate in English as to sing. It translates as singing because you don't use the infinitive to make a verb into a noun in English. You use the gerund form. So if you are looking at the book on page 154 and you check the examples, me gusta comer, the translation in the book says to eat is pleasing to me, which is incorrect. It shouldn't be to eat. It should be eating is pleasing to me. Me gusta bailar. To dance is pleasing to me. Dancing is pleasing to me. Me gusta ir al cine. To go to the movies is pleasing to me. Going to the movies is pleasing to me, and so on. Just change that if you're a student. So it will be now. The gerund form in English is not only used to transform a verb into a noun, it can be used in many ways. Like the most common way to use it in English is to form the present progressive or any progressive tense. I am eating. Eating is not a noun in this case. It's the main verb of the sentence. Okay, because it's not acting as a noun, it's acting as an action. The action of eating now and continue eating. So the same in Spanish. Infinitive verbs are not only used to transform a verb into a noun, they are used as the main verb when you have a string of verbs in a row. Like for example, I want to eat, which in Spanish will be yo quiero comer. Okay. I want to eat. Comer is a verb in the infinitive and it's not acting as a noun, it's acting as a verb because who wants to eat? I. The action of eating. Okay. Yeah. So pay attention here. So cantar is third person singular, as I explained before. nominal verbs are always considered third person singular. So we have to conjugate the verb to start in third person singular. Okay. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We will try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you are a student, just get in contact with us and you can ask questions during class. So that's page 154. Okay. On page 155, you have the book. The book says in so here I'm going to explain what an indirect object pronoun is. So an indirect object pronoun is a special pronoun that replaces the indirect object of the sentence. Okay. So in English, the sentence, I'm going to put it here. Singing pleases. I can also say this sentence in two ways. I can translate this sentence in two ways in English. Okay. A and B. Singing is pleasing to is pleasing. I think that's it. So what is an indirect object? An indirect object is the part of the sentence that receives the action of the verb indirectly. So in this sentence, she's singing what? It's understood that she's singing a song or something. No? We don't have to specify it in the sentence. Okay. So the action, I'm sorry, singing is pleasing to her. The action of pleasing, the action of pleasing, ayer le gusta comer. So yes, so singing is pleasing to her. The action of singing falls directly into something, a song. Okay. And who is pleasing the song? The person that is getting pleasing by the song is her. Okay. So her is getting affected indirectly by the action. In this case, to her will be then the indirect object. But instead of saying to her in English, you can use an indirect object pronoun and just say her. It's kind of the same in Spanish. A ella le gusta cantar. Okay, cantar is the subject, this is the predicate. So to sing what? A song, no? The action of liking to sing something is falling directly into the song or whatever she's singing. We don't have to explain it in the sentence. And the action of liking to sing something is affecting her indirectly. So in this case, a ella, which is the same as saying to her in English, is the indirect object. And le is like saying her is the indirect object pronoun. Now, I'm going to give you another example here to explain this better. Me gusta cantar. To give you another example. To him. This is him. Okay. Notice this. Le, le, le. Okay. As I explained before, a ella will be the indirect object, le will be the indirect object pronoun. I will be the indirect object, le will be the indirect object pronoun. Usted will be the indirect object, y le will be the indirect object pronoun. Okay. And let me see if I can give you more sentence. For le gusta cantar. So you notice here in these 4 sentences, I'm using le. No? In this sentence, I'm just using me. I explained before that the indirect object pronoun replaces the indirect object of the sentence. It's the same as in English. Singing is placing to her. Instead of saying to her, you can just say her. So her is replacing the indirect object of the sentence. We cannot have the same in Spanish, but in Spanish it's a little more complex because le in Spanish can mean 3 different things. Le in Spanish can refer to her, can refer to him. Sorry. Le in Spanish can translate in English as her, him, or you. It can also translate as it in English. Now, let me see, I should give you another example for this. So with the verb gustar, it doesn't make sense like an object with like something, so I'm going to leave it like that. But in some cases, it can translate as it. So le in Spanish can translate into 4 different ways. So as I explained before, an indirect object pronoun replaces the indirect object. So that means you don't have to put it in the sentence. You don't have to put the indirect object. So here in English, you are using just the indirect object, And in the bis sentence, you are using just the pronoun. You don't have to use both in the sentence in English. But in Spanish, we have to use both because le is confusing. If you just give me this sentence, le gusta cantar, I'm not going to understand you. I'm not going to understand if you are talking about her, or you are talking about him, or are you talking about you, or if you are talking about it. Okay. So to clarify this, I have to include the indirect object in the sentence to clarify the meaning of le. But if it is understood, I can just say this. If it is a conversation and it's understood that we are talking about her, I can just say this. Now, me is also an indirect object pronoun replacing the indirect object to me, which I can include it in the sentence if I want. So a mí is the indirect object. Me is the indirect object pronoun. So in this case, me only translates into English as me, only has one meaning. So in other words, I don't have to include it. I don't have to include the indirect object in the sentence. In English, you notice that you have to use either or, but not both. In Spanish, not. In Spanish, you use only the indirect object pronoun, but if you are going to use the indirect object, you have to also include the indirect object pronoun, as I did here. Because le is confusing, I cannot just leave it like that. And I also have to include the indirect object. But according to English rules, you can just use the indirect object to explain the sentence. In Spanish, you cannot do that, especially with VCC verbs. And I'm going to explain later an exception to this rule, but with VCC verbs, if you're going to include the indirect object, you cannot omit the indirect object pronoun. Okay. That's it for now. And if you have any questions, let me know and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. So on page 155, saying review, point 3, if the sentence is negative, place no before the indirect object. That is a mistake. To make a sentence negative, you have to place no directly before the indirect object pronoun, not the indirect object. So make that correction in the book. You have it. So if I want to make all the sentence negative, I will have to put no before the indirect object pronoun, not the indirect object. On page 156, the book says to clarify the ambiguity, the sentence must begin to clarify the ambiguity of le, for example. Okay. The sentence must begin with a prepositional phrase. That clarifies the meaning of the indirect object pronoun le. It is correct. So when they say prepositional phrase, they are referring to this. A prepositional phrase is any phrase that starts with a preposition. But that's a very general concept. In grammar, this is not called just a prepositional phrase. This is called indirect object because it's the part of the sentence that receives the action of the verb indirectly. That's more precise. So make those changes in the book. Anything that says prepositional phrase should be indirect object, not prepositional phrase. So correct the same on page 157. It says prepositional phrase. I'm going to explain page 160 now. So the page 150, they are giving you other VCC verbs. I'm just going to explain two of them here. So normally I said that having indirect and indirect object as a thing is very unusual because normally, like for example, I want to give uh, a present to my friend. It would be illogical to say I want to give a present to the wall, which is a thing. No? So normally, whoever receives the action indirectly should be an animal or a person, okay? Not a thing. Maybe a plant, but not a thing. But there are some exceptions to this rule with some VCC verbs. So in this case, I'm explaining that not only people or animals, you can also do it for plants. Example, a la planta le hace falta agua. A la planta le hace falta agua. So try to understand what is the subject here and what is the predicate. Pause the video before I give you the answer. So the subject here is agua. This means the sentence is in the third person singular. That's why we have to conjugate this expression, the verb hacer, in third person singular. Le hace falta agua. Okay? It's the same, water is missing for the plant. So VCC verbs do not make that much sense in English, but if you want to understand the structure of the sentences, maybe translating this exactly into English will help you understand the structure. In English, you will say this: the plant needs water, or the plant is missing water. So in this case, the indirect object is the plant, which is not a person. On page 162, exercise 10.4, the first one and the fifth one. If you're not a student, I'm going to put the sentences here for you. So the first one is, les encanta ese carro rojo. So I explained this already. No, I didn't explain this. So les is similar to le. This means that les in English is an indirect, in Spanish is an indirect object pronoun, but it can translate into 4 different ways. Les can mean them, I guess in them, you all, basically them or you all, that's all. Them in English is used for both masculine and feminine. In Spanish is more detailed. Spanish is more detailed than that. So and then can also be used for things and animals. But in Spanish, is more complex. So les in Spanish can refer to the indirect objects, to the following indirect object pronouns: a ellos, a ellas, and it can refer to a ustedes, and it can refer to things. So for example, a la bicicleta y la casa, just to give you an example, is plural. So it can refer, in this case, I'm saying bicycle and house. In Spanish, we have pronouns to replace objects, but I'm not going to go into that now. They are called, you can use demonstrative pronouns to do that, to replace them, but I'm not going to go into that at this moment because that's part of another lesson. Les encanta ese carro rojo. So, a ellos, the indirect object in English will be to them. A ellas, to them as well. A ustedes, to you all. And in English, you can use the pronoun, personal pronoun, to them to talk about things. Okay. So les can refer to all of these. So it's confusing. It's ambiguous. So according to this, why is this sentence wrong? What is missing? Pause the video and try to figure it out. I'm going to give you the answers. This sentence is missing the indirect object because less is ambiguous. So if you give me this sentence, I'm not going to understand it. You have to give me more context. So to give me more context, you add the indirect object. Let's say, a ellas. Bueno, let's say, a ustedes. A ustedes les encanta ese carro rojo. Okay. So fix that in the book. Let's go now with page 162, exercise 10.4, fifth one. The fifth one has the following example. Le fascina esa computadora. Le fascina esa computadora. I explained this already, so try to figure it out. Tell me why the sentence is wrong. I'm going to explain now. Le is an indirect adjective pronoun that is not clear. It's ambiguous. Because of that reason, I have to include an indirect adjective to clarify the meaning of it. Tell me just that, and I'm going to understand. It will be a ellos, a él le fascina esa computadora. Page 162, exercise 10.5, number 6. The sentence is this: a usted le molesta su perfume. A usted le molesta su perfume. que le permita. Usted le molesta su perfume. That's the first sentence. And I'm going to give you a second sentence to explain this better. As you can see, the first one is a question. The second one is an affirmation. The first one in English is, does her perfume bother you? The second one, her perfume bothers you. It's an affirmation. If you notice here, the structure is exactly the same in Spanish. So if you don't change the tone, I'm going to think that you are affirming and not asking a question, because it's exactly the same structure. So you want to ask a question with a VCC verb, you have to change the tone. Example, a usted le molesta su perfume, perfume. I'm changing my tone to let you know that it's a question, not an affirmation. But another way to do this sentence is this way. And I'm referring to the question, not to the affirmation. Okay, notice what is happening here. Okay. Sorry, I made a mistake here. So it will be I'm done. So let's concentrate only on the first one and the third one. What do you think is happening here? Let's think for a moment, and then I will explain. So what is happening here is that instead of following the same structure as an affirmative sentence, you can take the indirect object and place it after the main verb. The main verb is to bother, okay? So I can place it here. By doing that, it's more clear that what you are asking is a question, not an affirmation. So this is a way to do it that is extremely common. I will say it is more professional in Spanish. This is something the book doesn't teach you. So you're going to take notes in the book. Take notes about this on page, the part where they explain how to transform this into a question. Yes, on page 155. Page 155 looks like they are trying to help you understand how to form a question. I don't see it here, unfortunately. I don't know. It's like they're not explaining this well. So put it on page 53. You're a student, because this is another way and a more professional and common way to do a question with a VCC verb. You just take the indirect object and place it after the verb. Now, in Spanish, the format for questions is extremely flexible. You don't need to nerf this or do this, but basically, I'm just going to explain it quickly if you want to take a note about this. But in Spanish, you can place the indirect object in many other places in the sentence. You can move it around if you want, as long as it is after the main verb. So the indirect object can go after the main verb, after any verb after any nominal verb, after any noun, or at the end of the sentence. And I'm going to give you a lot of details about this, but I'm just going to give you an example with the same sentence. ¿Le molesta su perfume a usted? Okay. In this case, I'm placing it at the end of the sentence. That's also correct. Yeah. With the seventh one, I'm going to put it here. Exercise 10.57 will be a ustedes les importan las lecciones. A ustedes les importan las lecciones. I already explained this, so try to figure it out. This is a way to make a question, but there is a more common and more professional way to do this question, to create this question. Try to figure it out, pause the video, and I will give you the answer now. Another way to do this will be a more common or more professional would be is to take the indirect object of the sentence and place it after the main verb. Okay. Les importan nuestras lecciones. So you are a student. I would like you to change these sentences to reflect what I'm telling you here. Now, VCC verbs are not the only ones that use indirect objects. Transitive verbs can also use indirect objects. And I'm going to give you an example. Ella le quiere dar un regalo a Juan. Ella le quiere dar un regalo a Juan. So to give is a transitive verb in this case. It's acting as a transitive verb. What is a transitive verb? It's a verb that requires a direct object to have meaning, or that uses a direct object, because the same verb can be also used in the intransitive way, which in transitive is the opposite. Transitive verbs are verbs that do not require an indirect object. Ella le quiere dar un regalo a Juan. The action of wanted, so I'm going to translate this. He wants to give a gift to Juan. The action of wanting to give falls directly into a present and falls indirectly into Juan. Right? So, in other words, the indirect object of the sentence is to Juan. The indirect object pronoun is le. Now, remember that I don't have to include the indirect object all the time, because instead of adding the indirect object, I can just use the indirect object pronoun. But since le is ambiguous, I have to include the indirect object to explain the meaning of le. To explain that it's him, it's not her, it. Okay? Ella le quiere dar un regalo. Ella le quiere un regalo a Juan. So, notice here that this is a transitive verb, is not a visitive verb. Because in this clause, ella is the subject. And le quiere dar un regalo a Juan is the predicate. So it follows the normal structures that you know in English. Subject, predicate. It's not inverting the sentence. So it's not a VCC verb. In other words, transitive verbs can also use indirect objects and indirect object pronouns. Now, normally the book tells you to use both. If you want to clarify lay, you have to include the indirect object. But according to the book, with transitive verbs, you cannot remove the indirect object pronoun. Let's concentrate only in this sentence. According to the book, you can do this. You will be missing a word here. You will be missing the indirect object pronoun because you need to have both. This is not completely true. According to the Royal Academy of the Language, this is also valid, but only for transitive verbs, not for VCC verbs. So this sentence will be also correct, according to the Royal Academy of the Language. If you have a transitive verb, you don't have to include the indirect object pronoun if you already have the indirect object in the sentence. But the same Royal Academy of the Language of Spain advises that it's more common to use both. This is called double object according to Spanish grammar. So they advise you to use both. If you are going to include an indirect object, you should also include the indirect object pronoun. It's the most common thing to do, but with transitive verbs, this is also correct. You can make that note on page 166. Okay. Page 169. And we are going to exercise 10.10. Okay. Si tienes frío, I'm going to put the sentence here. Okay. So according to the book, this is the sentence. Si tienes frío, cama, yo blank, un suéter. The book is asking you to use, for this answer, is asking you to use the verb to give in Spanish, and it's asking you to use the indirect object to you, which in this case you should replace the indirect object with an indirect object pronoun. Okay. So I'm going to give you the answer for this so you can see what is wrong. Not the answer, sorry. So, si tienes frío, according to the book, this should be the correct answer. If I translate this into English, if you are cold, I give you a sweater. Is that a good sentence in English? I would say a better sentence in English should be, if you are cold, I can give you a sweater. Huh? So I would suggest you to change to give to can give. So try to figure it out, pause the video, and once you're ready, continue. La respuesta, si tienes frío, yo te puedo dar un suéter. This makes more sense in Spanish, and I think also in English. If you disagree, leave the thing in the comments. On page 171, exercise 10.11, number 13. The 13 is like this. Le digo a ella que su idea es buena. Le digo a ella que su idea es buena. Le digo a ella que su idea. No, you can use your translator to find your answer. I want you to translate this into English. Pause the video before you see the answer. I'm going to give you the answer now. This in English is, I tell her that her idea is good. This is a good sentence, but it's an incomplete idea. To make it better, let's do it this way. Le digo a ella que su idea es buena cada vez que pregunta. So now this sentence is better. Try to figure out why and try to translate it. I'm going to continue now. This sentence in English is, I tell her that her idea is good every time she asks. I'm giving you a time frame to give you a more complete idea. And exercise 10.12, number 3, 171. Please make corrections for this sentence that I just gave. I'm going to give you the sentence that appears here. This is number 3 from exercise 10.12. A usted le molesta la contaminación de las ciudades grandes. La contaminación de las ciudades grandes. According to the book, this is a question. A usted le molesta la contaminación de las ciudades grandes. So this should be, a usted le molesta la contaminación de las ciudades grandes. Remember that is a question. Now, what I want you to do here is to create this question in a different way. I already explained this. So try to figure it out before you see the answer. And if you can, try to give me at least 2 ways to do it. So I'm going to give you the answer now. The first option could be le molesta a usted la contaminación de las ciudades grandes. Another option could be le molesta la contaminación a usted de las ciudades grandes. A usted, a usted, a usted. 3 different ways to ask the same question. This one is the most common way to do it in conversation and in a professional frame. Le molesta la contaminación a usted de las ciudades grandes. As I said before, questions are extremely flexible in Spanish. All you have to do is take the indirect object only. This is only for VCC verbs. And place the indirect object almost anywhere in the sentence. As I explained before, after the main verb is the easiest way, but you can also place it after any noun, after any other verb in the infinitive form, or at the end of the sentence. Page 172. Number 9. And this question is, ¿qué le contesta usted al muchacho si le dice que él tiene miedo de nadar? ¿Qué le contesta usted, muchacho, si le dice que él tiene miedo de nadar? Now, as part of the exercise, try to translate this into English. When you are ready, continue with the video. So, what do you tell the boy if he tells you he's afraid of swimming? In English, it's a perfectly fine question. But in Spanish, the way they format the sentence is weird. And I'm just going to give you a better option first, and then I'm going to explain. Okay, like this. ¿Qué le diría usted al muchacho si le dice que tiene miedo de nadar? Muchacho si le dice que tiene miedo. This one is a much better sentence. Okay, try to figure it out. Try to translate this one. For this, you're going to need the translator because I'm using advanced grammar here. Once you are done, continue with the video. So this one is not what do you tell. This one is what would you say to the boy if he tells you he's afraid of swimming? What would? This is what is called what would you tell? What would you tell him? Or what would you tell the boy? This is what is called conditional tense. This conjugation here is conditional tense in Spanish. And why am I using conditional tense here? Because I'm using a if clause. Okay. And this is what is called an irreal. This is a translation from Spanish grammar to English. So you may call it in a different way in English grammar, but this is called a fictitious conditional tense, conditional clause. Okay. And this is advanced grammar, so I'm not going to go into these two now, but basically I'm just going to explain quickly si le dice que tiene miedo nada. A conditional clause is fictitious or unreal if I'm asking if I'm asking or I'm saying if for an event that may happen. If it is an event that will definitely happen, then it's real. But in this case, it's unreal because it may or not, or it may happen or not. Si le dice, ¿qué le diría usted al muchacho si le dice? For this reason, we have to use the conditional tense in the main clause. These are two clauses, which is too advanced for now. Okay. So use this sentence better. I know this is more advanced, but I gave you already the translation. Page 173, exercise 10.13. And we are going to talk here about number 4. So here you're supposed to translate from English to Spanish. And here they are asking you to translate who is going to buy books for the children. Okay. Now try to translate that into Spanish. You can use the translator if you need to. And you're ready, let me know. No, sorry, when you're ready, continue with it. Entonces, who is going to buy the books for the children? In Spanish, this will be this way. ¿Quién va a comprar libros para los niños? ¿Quién va a comprar libros para los niños? So try to think of this in English. Who is going to buy books for the children? What is the indirect object in that sentence in English? So in English, who is going to buy books for the children? That sentence doesn't have an indirect object, because indirect objects in English and Spanish should use the preposition to, not for. In other words, for the children is not an indirect object. In Spanish, is called complemento circunstancial. This is advanced grammar, so I'm not going to go into this now. Complemento circunstancial. Complemento circunstancial, which in English could be circumstantial object or circumstantial complement. And just translating from Spanish to English, I'm not 100% sure how you call this in English. But this is not an indirect object. Okay. So this example here, what they are asking you here is shouldn't be part of this lesson. So let's change this sentence for to something different. Let's change it then. Who is going to buy books? Who is going to buy books? Who is going to give books to the children? That will be a better sentence. To the children is an indirect object. So try to figure it out. It will be continuing, pause the video and continue when you're ready. ¿Quién le va a comprar libros? Oh, who's going to give, sorry. Who's going to give books to the children? Give. ¿Quién le va a dar? ¿Quién le va a dar libros a los niños? ¿Quién le va a dar libros a los niños? In this case, a los niños is an indirect object. Page 173, exercise 10.13. They are asking you to translate the following sentence. I will bring you coffee if you bring me tea. I will bring. That's future tense. We haven't learned future tense if you're a student. So, but we have learned a form of the future, which is called an immediate future. So let's change this sentence to immediate future so it's easier for you. Instead of using the sentence that I gave you, try to translate, I am going to give you coffee if you bring me tea. That will be easier for you. You're a student with us. And if you don't know future tense, I'm going to give you the answer now. I am going to give you coffee. Te voy a dar café si me traes té. Te voy a dar café si me traes té. Number 10, same page, 173. I tell you that the train is coming. The train is coming. That is progressive tense, present progressive tense in English. We haven't learned that yet. If you don't know present progressive tense in Spanish, I'm going to give you a different action. Let's do this one instead. I tell you that the train is going to come. Okay? Try to figure it out, and I'm going to give you the answer now. Te digo que el tren va a venir. Te digo que el tren va a venir. Page 176, and we are going to end this explanation with this last sentence. That's the first one. Bueno, last two sentences. Isabel le gusta viajar. A Isabel le gusta viajar. I explained this already. There are different ways to do this sentence in Spanish, and there is one that is more popular. So try to figure it out before I continue. Okay, I'm going to give you the answer now. Le gusta a Isabel viajar. Try to give me another one. Okay. So we have here Isabel, Isabel, and Isabel. Okay. Three different ways to do the sentence, and I explained this already. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We will try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you want to learn with us, please visit our website at espeng.net. Okay, have a good one, everybody. Bye.